So, as Dr. Sudhir was warning you, please be kind with me because what I'm telling. I mean, you may not immediately agree with it. So I request you to not to get into an argumentative mind. Just listen. You don't have to agree with me at all. Actually, just listen to certain things that I'm trying to address. You see, this whole my journey began right from my fourth year in engineering when I found that I was not at all interested in education. I was always a backbencher, and I found that I don't have any interest at all. And when I looked around in my college, I found that it is a similar case with most of the people. What I'm talking about interest is deep interest in wanting to know what is happening. Not at all about getting good marks, because people were getting fantastic marks, 80%, 90%, and then they would become an IAS officer or something like that. But commitment to learning, I found, was a very, very rare thing. This is what it began to disturb me, that why is it that that we are spending so much time there with absolutely no commitment. And luckily what happened was that I was expelled from the college for a year, and that gave me a fantastic time. And luckily one of the professors had a primary school, school that she had from nursery up to 6th standard or 7th standard. And he knew about my concerns, and he told me, why don't you go and spend some time in the school? Because I had also by then understood that it is from childhood that this whole tragedy begins. So I spent a year there, and then I came back, and but I had decided two things in my life: that I will never do what I don't like to do, and I will never do a 9-to-5 job. So I actually started embarking on a journey of wanting to find out what exactly is knowledge. And why is it so boring for most people? Why are they somehow dragging themselves to the classroom and sitting and, So right from the time I was really concerned, and luckily then I got into, design education. My post-graduation was in design education from NID, National Institute of Design, where I found a completely different environment, where I found that every student was deeply interested in learning. There was hardly any teaching that is happening. The faculty was committed to, they were all interested in something or the other. So you find a very interesting space where everyone is really talking about what are they exploring those days, And I remember when you meet each other, you will ask, what is that you're exploring these days? Whereas in the engineering college, our always discussion was which movie to go next, who is Amitabh Bachchan playing, which movie. Hardly ever the subject of whatever one is supposed to be learning. We're completely absent, And so NID was a fantastic place where I feel that it was a my second womb in which I began to rebirth. Other fundamental thing about NID was that it was fundamentally rooted in experience, not in theory learning, but doing and trying to learn. And then that space I used in a very, very interesting manner. I started exploring the software of learning. And then from there, my next destination was to live with indigenous rural tribal communities where people do not know how to read and write. Because I was interested in working with them to see whether their crafts can be improved, the handicrafts they were doing. But when I went to live there, I began to understand certain misconceptions that we educated people have about this, who call illiterate people, because we consider them as not intelligent, they don't have any knowledge, they have to get educated. I found that this whole scenario is very different. They are constantly in knowing, they are creating knowledge. And here again, I had a very interesting insight, and that insight I will now, take into start my presentation, where I will share some of the findings that I encountered. So let me start sharing my. Yeah, just give me a minute. Let me share this.
I can hear you very well.
Yeah, I have done it. I have shared the sound. Whenever it happens, the video. Yeah. So what my interest was that. Yeah. So reimagining higher education. This is the topic today. But I'm actually wanting to look at what is wrong with lower education. How can we reimagine higher education without understanding what has actually gone wrong with the from the childhood itself, so that is what I'm trying to talk about today. And there are certain basic premises of my exploration. Number one is that all living beings are learning and creating knowledge. Second premise is that we are biologically equipped to create knowledge. Third is that the formation of the neural network depends on the experiences we have. Fourth is that literates are taught the word, illiterates learn the world. So this is a completely different kind of a scenario, which means you can imagine what kind of neural network we have when right from childhood we are experiencing somebody teaching us, never learning autonomously. And the third thing is that the neural network of literates and illiterates are very different. And unfortunately, the cognitive science have not given much attention to this because there is an assumption that literacy has been fantastic and we are progressing. We know much better than the illiterate people. So this bias has always prevented us from trying to really understand, truly what are their, abilities. And the sixth premise is that experience is the ground for creation of knowledge. And the seventh is that autonomy is the condition that enables knowledge creation. So with this, now I would like to just tell you that my process has been, I call my process knowing by being, not by reading. In fact, in 1991, I decided when I was staying with indigenous communities or non-literate communities, I decided to stop reading completely. Because I understood that something fundamental is getting lost when we are constantly depending on reading to understand the world. So at 91, I stopped reading and I began to ask certain fundamental questions. How do we know what we know? How knowledge gets created? And what is that we come to know? Which means what is the content? And how senses function? And today I feel that senses are the tools for knowing, which is totally absent in the whole modern educational paradigm. And how does the content get stored? How memory functions? What is the role of reason? Is it conscious or subconscious? Then how do we understand? What is this process called understanding? Is it through reason or is there something else? So this has been the things that, consistently I began to inquire. Of course, I did not start with many of these questions. Slowly, these questions began to come in. And of course, there is one very, very deep aspect which has been completely missing in the modern scenario, which I don't have time to talk about, which is what is beauty? Because it is through senses this beauty also happens and cognition also happens. But beauty has absolutely no role in the modern paradigm of learning. So once again, I'm repeating this: literates learn the word, illiterates learn the world. And in fact, literates are taught the word and illiterates imbibe the word. I'm now replacing the word learning, which we always assume as a conscious activity, into a word called imbibing. Now, the best example is that the mother tongue that we acquired, we did not make any effort to learn. We imbibed it. Almost all the learnings that happen from 0 to 7 when there is no instruction at all are imbibing. If you remember how you learned your cycling, swimming, any activity from childhood when you had complete freedom, it was just an activity that involved imbibing, no effort, no conscious effort to learn. So I want to just take you through a simple experience. Now, please take a look at this. It's the same object. So this is one experience. Now let me take you through another experience. Yeah. So I'm distinguishing between these two experiences. This is actually learning the world. It's a physiological response. Senses are functioning in a different way. Whereas this is a completely different kind of experience where it is a mind that is accessing it. Because you have to put in a meaning there. It's a very, very different experience. And other thing that I want to just share with you is that imagine you're traveling from Delhi to Cochin or from Cochin to Delhi, And I'm sure for most of us who are educated in the two-dimensional paradigm, Traveling from Delhi to Cochin means we are coming down, and traveling from Cochin to Delhi means we are going up. So we have a vertical kind of so we have actually created a two-dimensional realm within our cognitive, we have a cognitive realm which is two-dimensional. That is why we assume that we are traveling up and down, which is an absurd kind of idea. See, once I was actually with a, non-literate person, and I was in Delhi, somebody introduced me and told that I am coming from down south, down, and when I came to the kitchen, she couldn't, because for a non-literate person, for an illiterate person, down means it is down underground. And we don't even seem to realize that there is a problem with this, conception. So let me also take you through one more activity. It's a simple activity. You try to name the color that I'm showing you. Within your mind, just name the color. Simple activity. Now continue the same activity, just naming the color. Please don't read. Name the color. Just name the color. See whether you can name the color or you're completely taken over by the mind in which is reading. So what I'm trying to show you is that how mind has become so overpowering that it doesn't allow you to see. It makes you read. Now, these two are completely two different types of experiences. So what I'm saying is that literacy completely changed the nature of language and reshaped our beingness. So we have become from experiential to mental, from contextual to dependent, from process orientation to product orientation, from knowing to knowledge, because we don't have we are always dealing with knowledge as a product. We hardly write from childhood. We never go to the process of knowledge creation. Ready-made knowledge is given, you consume it, you memorize it, store it, and do whatever is possible with that. Analysis, permutation, combination, just a jugglery of mental information. So what is to be very clearly understood is that the formation of the mind and the processing system completely changes with this kind of a input. So we literates are shaped by the word and illiterates are shaped by the world. So literates have understanding, even memory, is in the realm of language and mind. For illiterates, understanding happens in the realm of experience itself. And the literate paradigm is that we are dealing with known, we are ready-made knowledge as a product, we analyze, we are dealing with fragments, we have linguistic memory, it's a result of teaching. And illiterate paradigm is we are dealing with unknown, knowing as a process, it's no longer a product. Creation of knowledge is happening and experience in the whole, but they don't get into fragmentary understanding. They experience the whole. Organic memory. In organic memory, world and the word are held together. It is not linguistic memory. And learning. Now, I found this fantastic definition of what is the meaning of cognitive delusion. Now, this is normally, a state of mental problem, but you please read and see whether the literates are trapped in this. A false belief based on incorrect inference about external reality that is firmly sustained despite what almost everybody else believes. So this is a fantastic definition to compare between illiterates and literates. Now, literates are learning the word and creating a story in their head and believing that is the world. So, and again, I've actually looked at this whole cognition from a completely different point of view. Because in the Western paradigm, cognition is something that happens in the mind. The body has senses, experience has no role. And from my research, I found that this is absolutely not the right way. Of course, now the latest embodiment, people are now talking about 4E's and things like that. But even that is quite, something that has not really been truly understood. So cognitive dissonance is this, that body imbibing experience and the mind engaging language. So in the classroom, what really happens is that the body imbibes the teaching experience of the teacher. the body absorbs the anger, the fear, whatever is happening. Whereas the mind is learning the language, meaning mathematics or chemistry or whatever. So there is a dual activity that is happening. One in which the body absorbs what is happening around, because that is the way body functions. Body has no other way to function. So operating system of the modern mind is that it is linear, sequential, fragmented, compartmentalized, out of context, meaning it is never present. It's always absent. Analytical, and it deals with abstract. Abstract actually is the wrong terminology. Mental creation of ideas. It's not abstract actually. But this is the assumption that we're dealing with abstract knowledge, because abstraction is actually a process that happens within us. You cannot, it's like, digestion happens within us. Digestion is not something that happens outside and then you consume. You can consume raw food, but digestion per se happens within you. Exactly like this, abstraction is something that happens within us. So the nature of language, the written language, is that it is linear, sequential, fragmented, compartmentalized, out of context. It is always dealing with past. It is absent. The object of what you're talking about is absent. It's not treated as a product, knowledge. So you can see the similarity between the nature of written language and the cognitive operating mind of the literates. And what is really in the nature of experience? Experience is non-linear. It is simultaneous. Experience is holistic, and it is present. It is in process.
Somebody is remarking for you to slow down a little bit in the way you present, but it's your style. Go ahead.
No, I'm only worried that I won't be able to finish. That's why I'm running a little bit faster, because this is almost like a.
We extend the time a little bit anyway. Go ahead.
So this is the nature of experience is completely different. Actually, it is non-linear, simultaneous, holistic, present. So I want to share with you the paradox of modernity. I'm finding this very interesting thing, the parallel between education that is happening and the development of AI. And please listen to this scientist.
One can look at the story of computer science and think we have at least 3 ages. One is the age of programmers. In the age of programmers, you have to pay very smart people quite a lot of money to make some system behave in an intelligent way. We are now in the age of labelers, in which you pay a lot of people not much money in order to label data. And both of them, especially this one, is n going to infinity, number of labeled data going to infinity. But of course, children don't have big data. We really would like to be able to show one car and one plane to a child, like we do for a child, and then they're able immediately to generalize very well. So our ideal is n going to 1, and to have computers that learn like children from experience.
So this is very interesting that after all these years, just because they wanted to develop artificial intelligence, they have started studying how intelligent children are. And all this, from the time the education started, this was never something that, the modern paradigm ever thought of. But now there's a compulsion. And even the, rediscovery of body is also compelled by AI, because the mind has to be, placed somewhere. That is how I think the robotics is what forced, the paradigm to think about, oh, you need a body now, you have to place the intelligence that you are talking about into a body. So then that is when body also became important. You see, so this is the paradox of modernity. And all these institutions are now involved in trying to understand how children learn. But I can assure you that their research is completely wrong. That is because there are some premise problem. First of all, they are treating children, the whole experiment is happening in a lab-like environment. In a lab-like environment, children don't behave naturally. It is, so what is interesting is that artificial intelligence is being developed by learning how children learn, but used for dumping children down, because you're not going to change your educational paradigm it will still continue the same way, where you think you know what is to be, what children should learn, you know. So our option today is that whether we should learn from AI how to teach, or whether we should learn from children how to learn. So my process has been, I've been documenting children from 1991 or so, because I realized that unless I document through videos and images and share with literate people, they will not believe at all what I'm trying to talk about. So it has been a process where years of documentation has taken place, and what I'm distinguishes between something called implicit knowledge creation and explicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge creation is something that is happening all the time. That when a child is engaging with the world, they are doing nothing but knowledge creation implicitly. And all the qualities of a true learner is present. They're exploring, they are scientific, they are, they have an aim, they have a plan. Intelligence is growing here, developing. Risk-taking is happening. You name it. Everything is there, provided you leave children alone. So this is the natural condition. Natural condition of learning is unknown. They're engaging with the real world. There is no ready-made information. There is no training. And natural development process at work. Their learning process is getting developed. Comprehension is happening, knowledge creation, So all this is natural ability of a child. And their qualities are getting developed, Intelligence, creativity, being open, adventurous. So how we learn and what we learn are actually biologically bound. Now, biology has been completely taken out of the modern paradigm. So the tools, qualities, attitudes, skills, even the content is dictated by biology. Illiterate create implicit knowledge of the real world, which is outside the realm of language. And this knowledge can be explicated by becoming attentive to what is implicitly known. And this is what I call as metacognition. Metacognition is not thinking about thinking. Metacognition is actually becoming aware of implicit knowledge that is inherent within us. So the best example is that how right at the age of around 3, we are all able to speak very well our mother tongue with no explicit knowledge of grammar. But we are speaking grammatically correct language, correct sentences we are making. But also, if you remember, when grammar was taught to us in 3rd standard or whichever, I don't remember, 4th or 5th standard, I think grammar was one of the most boring subjects. And finally, we ended up hating it. Of course, we tried to master it, because I think grammar gave you far more marks, because you give one answer, you get 1 mark or something like that, So we spent time learning grammar, not because we really enjoyed it, but that was fetching us good marks. And finally, where have we landed up? So what I'm trying to say is that the way thing is wrong. The way we explore self to understand life, we need to revisit children completely afresh to understand what is to be a human being. And my definition of human being is someone who is involved biologically in creation of knowledge. And in fact, I call the literates human knowings. We are preoccupied by knowledge, but we don't know how to be. So first thing that we should ask is that why children learn? To me, I would relate this to why there is learning at all in nature. And life ensures that life is sustained at all cost. That is my one of the understanding. And in order to sustain life, qualities and abilities are embedded in all living beings. Curiosity is there. Every being has. It's not a human thing. Every living being is curious. They are creative. Creativity actually means that you are responding to the unknown. That is actually what is the meaning of creativity. It's not something that is fancy that artists can do, but responding to the unknown is a creative act, which is what every living being is doing actually. And it's adventurous. There's no fear, overcoming fear. So all this is part of the part and parcel of inherently present in us. How children learn is that children recreate their experiences using whatever is available. So the first toy is their body itself. I'm sure all of you must have seen how children use their palm as a mobile phone, or how we have become a vehicle, by roaming around and all that, how we treat our body itself as a toy and playfully exploring the world. So the biggest misunderstanding of modernity is that they create a product called toy to play. So they completely distort the process of making toy, which is natural part of our cognition. I will come to this little later. And children turn every activity into play because they are playful. How children learn, one more thing is that they experience the whole and explore the parts. Now, I'm talking about all this from my years of study on what are the things that children do. And this I found has a very, very clear, it's like this, that our learning of grammar, our learning of language, there was an implicit grammar present. Exactly like this, when children are learning the real world, there is a blueprint to do that. There is a grammar behind it. So this grammar is something that I began to decode after years of work. So one is that development of the cognitive system, tools, senses get awakened, process, open-ended exploration, qualities, playfulness, abilities to be open, to ability to hold out, skills, physical development, intelligence, and habits. What I mean by habits is that your neural pathways takes on a certain, so there is a different habit that neural pathways take on. Structure of the neural network. Now, all this is something that is important to a natural learning environment of a child. And how does the cognitive system get developed? So senses are the tools. You can see for every activity that a child does, they are constantly observing. That when a child is constantly observing you, how you are speaking. So this is one of the most important videos that I have, where luckily, of course, in the net, I got this fantastic video in which how the child is making comparison and finding similarity and difference. In fact, this is the crux of learning, that we imbibe this information by comparing what is similar and what is different, So I'm telling that there is something called cognitive foundation, natural cognitive foundation, where sensory input is the ground. And then they connect the word and the sound. So, of course, then inference is there. Imagination is there. Now, because this is a process of abstraction. And finally, conceptual understanding. So it is actually going through all this, that abstraction happens and conceptual understanding happens. This is a natural process. And unfortunately, we have not given any attention to this at all, actually. So I'm just taking an example. When somebody, explores, when a child is getting mango, so it engages, the smell happens, the shape, color, size, background, touch sensation, taste, So it's a simultaneous experience of that. What children learn is the real world that they experience, objects, processes, household things and all that. And again, there is a clear picture, grammar to what they learn. They learn the form, how something looks like, what is it used for, how is it made, material quality, structural stability, relationship between these things, and the context. Context is where it happens. Form. I'm sure most of you must have done this in childhood. When you got the book, you put it like this and called, this is a form. And so I ran a school for 3 years in Pune, where children were left completely free. I documented this there. So fantastic use of books, actually. And they were reconstructing the flats that they see all the time, recreation of a market. Very interestingly, this flour was used in place of bengan for brinjal, whereas they were able to get exactly this to replace the chili. Function is that I'm sure most of you must have done this, just had a bedsheet over a table and told that this is your house. So in this case, it is the function that is being explored. They are not making house, property of material is, I'm sure you must have seen this. Every child, when they sit on a sofa, bounce. So in the school, this is so iron for bouncing, and this happens in the railway stations. The children sit there and start sliding. Process is they make the house. I'm sure all of you must have done it in childhood. Whatever material available, you make house, with pillow, chair, or whatever is available. So structure, of course, is a structural stability. As you progress, you begin to learn how to put this together so that it is stable. And this doesn't happen in a linear fashion. There is a simultaneity about it. Sometimes it is looked at in fragments. So a house constructed with an exploration like that. So this is something that I'm exploring now. What is a cognitive schema? Object, sensation, form. Well, this will take a little bit more time. I'm just showing this here too. And how children learn language. This is very important to understand. Learning language and learning the world, whatever learning children do, there is a fantastic similarity. And I call whatever we saw just now metaphor in action, because we normally think of metaphor in language only, that how comparison based on similarity is made. Now, I've just showed you how this happens in the real world. So in language, it's very important to understand language, because language is what is confusing us all the time, because we assume that this is what knowledge is all about. I'm telling this is just description of knowledge. It is not knowledge. And so what is the use, Again, I'm just bringing it back, reminding literates learn the word, illiterates learn the word. So there are two types of languages. What experiential language is what illiterate people use, because the world and the word are integrated here. Mental language is of literates, where the words are devoid of experience. And one statement I'm making is that senses has access to the world, whereas mind has access to language. How children learn language? So Bangalore slums children learn 4 to 5 languages by the time they reach 4 years. No teaching at all. And whichever language you learn, the experience is the same. So the mango that they eat is same, even though it is called manga, mango, tango, congo, you call whatever name, but the experience is the same. So the children are learning these 4 languages in the context of same experience. So the most important lessons in this is that conscious memory is not needed. There is no effort in learning. Something called organic memory is there. Reasoning is not done at all. We learn by self-organization. Implicit knowledge of grammar gets embedded without effort. So this is something that is absolutely has no role in our modern paradigm of education. And how children learn language is that adults provide the word, children hear as it as sound only, and experience, meaning gets created in experience. And the distortion happens when adults provide meaning itself. So body and experience is removed from the process, autonomy is killed. So mind creates a linguistic world and distorts experience, So one simple example, a small child is calling pa as water. And when he was taken to the sea, he got fascinated and made this. He extended his hands and told pa boo with extended hands. So this is a whole sentence in which pa is water, boo is the sound of the waves. The extended hand meant hugeness, So there is a very clear process that the child takes on to understand, to create knowledge, to connect the world and the word in a very organic way. So how physiologically they are connecting each word, that is what is important. How experience is always grounded when in real learning, and then how does that connect with the word. So PP is vehicle, 4-wheelers are bada PP, ships, this is all bada PP. And whenever he sees traffic, he keeps on doing PP. And slowly the notion of quantity arises in a child. this is another very interesting thing, how children create category. So this child saw a flying peacock. So the child told it is kaka. And then that same peacock got down and started walking. And the child told this is kuta, the same peacock. So the child was creating the first category that all flying ones are called kaka, where that is the first encounter with kaka, which flies. And all walking ones are kuta for this child. So this is very interesting how children develop, along with the real world, from the experience, how do they create categories, how do they create adjectives, So these categories are abstracted from experience that they arise out of sensory experience, of hearing, seeing, smelling, all that. So even without language, this process is going on. Because when somebody, experiences mango and then another fruit, banana, and, as opposed to some vegetables, there is clearly a distinction that the senses are making. All this belongs to sweetness and all this belongs to non-sweetness, And this is actually, this whole categorization is based on experience, not on language. So when children learn language in a natural way, they retain the integrity of the mind and body. And the world and the word are integrated in this process. So when children learn to speak, what it actually means is that they are articulating their understanding of the world. And their language cannot be separated from experience itself. No? And the experience of the world integrates with language, and the language he uses expresses to articulate. Sorry, this is yeah. So I'll quickly take it through natural play, playfulness as cognitive activity. Play is actually completely misunderstood idea of modernity. So this child takes a bite, the coconut piece, one bite. He sees the form and he says, this is Nandi bull. Immediately then he remembers the moon and says, this is half moon. So you see the process that is happening. This is the process by which they recreate their toys. And play is nothing but reenactment of experience. What you just saw was a play. And toy is the prop, that is an object used as props in the reenactment of experience. So for this child, this was her child. This became a vehicle. She sat on that. So any object has this, flexibility. And in fact, what I say is that ready-made toys are more dangerous than schools. Because toy is actually a process, part of the development process. Hand as toy, a simple object, and this is what children do. They are exploring their real context and finding out what is it that is happening in the world. Flower becoming a, I don't know what you call that. Sorry. You see how he is using the mic. So an immediate response to situation is what children are doing. This is used for tabla or no, the mridangam. With 2 combs, this child has made his aeroplane. So when did we think that children need toys to play? Various things that children create everywhere. So I will just quickly take you through drawing, because drawing was something that we studied in a very deep manner. Why modernity doesn't understand drawing is because they treat drawing as a separate activity from everything else. And drawing is seen as skill development and drawing is seen as art. Nobody has ever seen drawing is a cognitive activity that children do to understand the real world, provided we don't interfere at all. And there is a strong connection between what they experience, what they play, and what they draw. Now, this is after 3 years of working with, having a school in Pune, where we began to study children, and I created a completely free environment, no interference at all. Children were spontaneously responding to what they were, what they wanted to do every day. So there is clearly, we found there is a developmental stages in drawing. Crawling, like crawling, there is scribbling. They draw what they observe, and they usually, the animals and vehicles are drawn from the side because that is what is normally seen. And this is a crab because they catch crabs, so they look at the front of it. It's an interesting drawing. This is the viper, in the viper, because this child sits next to the driver all the time. And this girl, it is her buffalo, and she feeds the buffalo, every day. So for her, seeing the buffalo is always from the front. And even in writing, there is a very clear stage. She's trying to write. So what I'm now claiming is that if you really don't interfere at all, children will learn how to read and write completely on their own, provided there is an environment in which the adults are learning and writing and reading and all that. And you don't have to do any kind of drama acting. Just do your job and children will imbibe it. Because the process of learning is same for every activity, whether reading, writing, whether they are learning the real world, they're learning language, every learning they follow the same principle of finding similarity, finding difference, looking at the statistical similarity, the things that come together, how do you group it? So abstraction happens here also. And how they look at daily life and how they graduate from simple words to story, how from one object to several objects, and how then it leads to events that they see every day. And from 2 dimension to 3 dimension, this is such an interesting kind of an idea, that how they begin with 2-dimensional drawing of a bus, slowly how 3D creeps in, and it's a complete process. How finally they reach 3D. It's a very interesting thing. So this is something that I saw happening on a single day, that how the child is trying to understand the 3-dimensional aspect of a bus, It's almost like what we learned in our first year in engineering, something called development of surfaces, where the 3D was opened up to see how it becomes flattened and 2D. Exactly the same process this child was doing, and how they're exploring 3D. Look at the steps, how steps are dealt here, and slowly how does the step become after some time. And they get into continuous practice. Repetition is one thing that the child does, continuously repeat, where is the place for a child to repeat anything in the classroom in a spontaneous way? Imagination. Look at the way the child has drawn the baby in the stomach, because this teacher was pregnant at that time. So she had baby Zoe in her stomach, and the cat has 3 generations now, the child and that child. So form is explored, function is explored. See, this is the viper movement. So they very clearly study how the viper moves, and it gets translated into their several drawings. It's very, very interesting that how when you provide a very flexible kind of a thing like chalk and board, so flexible they become. So I was walking, and they actually in the village, the leopard has come. So they started talking about it, and when they saw me, they drew me there, just brought me in there. Then they decided to put me in the stomach. So this was a very, very interesting thing that I saw, that how flexible they could become when they keep on erasing and creating new stories. So several understanding that we had of children, that how free they are free from rules, how they make use of a certain form and make the, immediately they made use of that form and made a vehicle there. So drawing is the playing that children do on 2-dimensional surface, provided of course they are free. And drawing is the process by which children make sense of the 3-dimensional world in terms of 2-dimensional space. So I think, and I've recently written a book called Seeing with Hands, based on my study of children, from that school. And so I think I will stop here just to, so knowledge creation is something that I've been looking at. So simply, I'll just finish this. Conscious knowledge creation as an act of making what is implicit explicit. How the implicit knowledge of grammar that we have, how do we make that explicit in an experiential way and not in a teaching way? How do we make ourselves pay attention to how we speak, what we speak, and why we speak, as a metacognitive attention and how do we then decode it? No? So this is something that I'm quite keen to explore, and I think this is exactly what can happen by looking at even the skills that we have. That how do we know that? How do we decode the knowledge of the explicit knowledge of cycling that we have? Because of course the cycling knowledge we have in an implicit manner, or any activity for that matter. So what is the process by which we make what is implicit explicit? So I think with this I will stop here.
Thank you very much for an excellent lecture. And I'm really pleased that you gave this lecture because from my experience, many of the things you're talking about are very important. And most of my time, even today, I like playing with children more than staying with adults because they teach me a lot. And number one. Number two, many of the things you're talking about are also being recognized slowly in the academic literature. For example, Professor George Lakoff from Berkeley has written several books on what is called metaphors we live by. Even though he plays in the linguistic world, he's also talking about the physical world. And his book, Philosophy of the Flesh, really points to what you're talking about here, saying the metaphors of the world are coming out of the experience of the human body projected onto the world. That's why we say up, down, right, left. Many of these things are very much there. And the third point is that I want to make quickly is his colleague, Eleanor Roche, has been arguing that there is no strict classification system. Classification systems are based on prototypicality. And that is how, like you pointed out, a cat becoming big cat and so on. It's the prototypicality which underlies classification. And a lot of your observations are really to the point of what is being discovered in the last 25, 30 years by cognitive psychologists. And also the notion of cognition is not structured through language, but cognition happens in the wild. Edwin Hutchins has done a wonderful piece of work of Polynesian sailors navigating through the sea for fishing in the night. And they are illiterate people, obviously. However, they are very literate in the sense you're talking about. So I just wanted to add a few things to your comments. Your lecture, from my own perspective, I can talk to you a lot more about engineering in the same way, which we shall keep later, and let people ask questions. I think there is Mr. Divyaraj Amia who wants to ask a question. Please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. And I came to know about Mr. Jinan, I think a few months ago, or at least 1 year. And every time there's something new to, within quote, learn or unlearn. I would like to change the topic slightly because I have one more question. It is quite true that this is the question of the way we learn, I mean, only by being there. And it has been very wonderfully explained by one of our students, one of our friends, that if the migratory birds, they don't go to, say, some elite schools or Ivy League colleges or universities. It's there, this rationality in their body. And that's what we unlearn if we move through civilization or this mediation. This is called civilization. So that's the situation that we definitely also, for me, that's the kind of orientation that we need. But one more question that I would like to ask is the question of that he has also discussed in some other presentation. That's the topic of unboredom. By that we mean that with the increasing artificial intelligence, it won't be difficult for governments to fulfill our desires. And I mean, this is one possible future, that with the help of artificial intelligence or say nanotechnology, whatever it is, the new kind of authority will not be based on violence, coercion, and power. It will be based on realizing our wishes. So there it might be possible to realize our wishes, just like zoo animals for the zoo managers. I mean, we can be happy animals in the zoo. So it will be a new phase of domestication if nanotechnology and say, so many video channels we can have, video games that we can play endlessly, and unboredom that we have among Adivasi children, what can we learn from them? If nothing else happens, that means the ecological collapse or huge world war, everything goes on as it has been planned, that not a huge catastrophic. How do we find a way out on the basis of experience of children and Adivasi children, that if nothing else, then boredom will kill us?
Actually, the boredom is a modern invention.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no boredom in indigenous communities.
Yeah.
There are many reasons for that. I don't think I will have time to go into it in detail. But, see, one of the things that if you look at the modern educational paradigm, you can see that, first, the so-called knowledge was about physics, chemistry, mathematics, and all that. Then later they felt art should be introduced for some reason. Then art education came in. Then much later something called value education came in. So you see, actually a holistic experience of the world, which cannot be fragmented into knowledge, beauty, and value, has been completely, So your assumption is that when you learn physics, chemistry, mathematics, you don't have to have any value. Knowledge is value free. But whereas in your behavior, you must have value, that you should be good with people. But to me, this is a fundamental problem where what kind of knowledge that you should learn is the first value that you must encounter. Because indigenous, see, we talk about sustainability today after completely making life unsustainable. I don't think any of the indigenous communities ever will have even that word called sustainability, because by default, the knowledge they create is sustainable, because the value is embedded in everything that you do. Value is not an afterthought. So similarly, I will not go deep into this aspect. The tragedy with modernity is that whatever they are doing, they celebrate it. So boredom is a celebratory idea for a modern mind, because they think that it is in boredom that creativity happens. This is a completely absurd idea, but I mean, you have to live with it, because that is the way modern, and of course now there is a fantastic book called Against Reason. There are some fantastic books, something called Rousseau's Bastards or something like that, where reason has been critically looked at. To me, rationality is the fundamental problem of modernity. Without understanding how reason is integral to what you do, you take it outside and then you reason, which, of course, sorry, I don't think I will have time to go into this in detail.
I think the book you're talking about is called Voltaire's Bastard, and the reason rationality as dictatorship.
Yeah. I suddenly remembered Rousseau because he has written a fantastic book on children. No, that's the reason. Voltaire's. Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? There was extremely fascinating. Have you observed evolution of cooperation of specific cooperation specifically? How do you observe children communicate their experience, models, etc.? Sometimes in diagrams or experiences with each other.
Yeah. This is a fantastic thing. I have actually, as I told you, for 3 years, we ran a school. And so this is fascinating to see that our notion of leader and follower was one thing that is stuck to us. When 10, 15 children play together, our assumption is that there has to be one leader and the others are following. So what we found was that there was no leader at all in these, but the cooperation was happening very spontaneously. So, and I have fantastic videos on this, how 6-7 children are working on creating a small temple where all of them are doing independently and nobody is telling other what to do. So there is a very, very fantastic coordination that is happening without anybody coordinating it. This is what I found, So one of my friends was telling there are 2 types of coordination. One is subordinated coordination, which is what we have in modernity. Some leader will make you, cooperate, and that coordination happens from top down. And this is called coordinated cooperation, in which there is nobody to tell you what to do, but everyone somehow knows what to do. Now, this is something that I've seen with potters, indigenous communities. I have been working with potters for many years. And I've seen how 10, 15, 6, 7 of them work together And one day I noticed how they were, loading clay pottery, which is very fragile. I could see that there was absolutely no instruction, but everybody seems to know what is the next step, And this I've seen in children quite a lot. So it's this whole idea of cooperation in modernity, that you kill the natural sensibility for cooperation, and now you have cooperating, games for making people learn how to cooperate. See, that what I find the tragedy of modernity is that it destroys everything and then rediscovers it, package it, and sell it to you. It's all that you're inherently, you had all these qualities.
Mr. Rakesh, I think you wanted to ask a question. Please go ahead.
Sir, now in the domains of learning, say you emphasize that the child learns by psychomotor. So psychomotor plays a role, but at every stage of life, would it be possible to understand and make the learning?
Well, you see, what I'm trying to say is that if you look at the present educational paradigm, to me, it's a complete failure. Complete failure, mainly because it has turned against life. This is number one. Second thing is that as a species, the more you get educated, the less you know how to look after your children. I'm doing now parenting workshops all over, because actually the educated people do not know how to look after children. So I think this is a failure of the species to not to recognize there is a biological system at work, which is what should enable us to learn. And what I'm also telling is that, you see, 90% of the people in the educated sector are leading absolutely boring lives. Why is it happening? I think everybody, irrespective of whoever you are, should be enjoying whatever you're doing. This is absent. And again, now I also want to tell you that, see, the product of tradition, if you look at the fantastic Ayurvedic practices that we had in Kerala or anywhere, any indigenous practices, all these practices are rooted in experience. It is, of course, there are theories, but theory doesn't precede your experience. And one more point I want to make is that this is somebody who has been studying, the Indian Shastras, who was telling me one very, very important thing. That was that when a guru teaches a shishya a sloka, it is never explained. The shishya is just supposed to memorize it and hold it there with no effort to make an understanding. Understanding happens when experience happens. And because I keep telling that reasoning short circuits comprehension. In language, in the realm of language, when you conclude, it's an assumption that you've understood. Understanding is something that actually can happen only in the realm of experience. And that's what I feel.
There was a lovely exhibition in Washington of the toys made by African children from the villages. And it's very similar to the kind of things you're talking about, using sticks, stones, all kinds of things. And some of the toys were so sophisticated. Today, if you ask a child in a regular school to imagine a toy like that, would be beyond their realm of the experience. Yeah. And I think I would suggest to you that given that you are collecting all these toys of children from indigenous communities, it would be nice to have a traveling exhibition even within India of these toys. Toys, to show how these toys can create the new kind of imagination through objects around them.
No, I have not collected them physically. I have only photographs. I have several photographs. Because these are for children. This is, time. It's a time being kind of thing. They never store their toys. They can destroy it, make it something else. So they don't hold on to something and say, this is mine.
I totally agree with you. But this person who exhibited went around collecting them while the process. And I think that physical experience of watching a real toy having been made through these materials could, and actually this should be sent to all engineering schools, I think, first. With that, if there is any other comments, Sudhir, please go ahead and close the session, or whatever way you think is the best way to this thing. Shyam, you have any thoughts?
No, I thought this was a very insightful talk, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't have a question. Thank you.
Sudhir? Sudhir, Dr. Kota, any of you, any questions before we close the session? Question or comments?
No, but it is an extraordinary talk. It makes us think all over. You learn by doing. That is the most important thing in engineering. But that is what we need to practice, and we have to come out with various case studies where you really learn by doing. That is the most important way to do. Otherwise, today we are not bringing real engineers. That is the basic fundamental flaw. I thought engineering is one profession where this is what is to be practiced. So for all the gurus who are in this thing, I feel we need to rethink and come out. How do we do that? Abstraction is important, but doing is very, very critical. That is what is important. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Janan, for a wonderful talk.
Sudhir, you want to have some closing thoughts and close the session?
About the future CREI talks.
Oh, yeah. There are going to be 2 more talks. The next one, Sudhir, we have not finalized that. That will come in very soon. Go ahead, Sudhir. Go ahead.
So it will be on by Professor Sharma, who is an entomologist and has built a device to reduce that is protect the food grains from insects, and insect removal tool that he has detected. It has been ranked as one of the top 100 innovations in the country in this year. So he will be giving a talk on 29th November, that is from 2 weeks from now. That will be the immediate next talk.
And
so
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
The talk after that will be by Dr. Guru Madhavan, who has written several books on engineering called Applied Minds and other things. And he has agreed to talk on December 14th, I believe. I'll send the dates. He'll be talking about the book he has written on wicked problems. So those are the 2 arranged for now. Yeah.
If you can put together the talk of today's talk, and if any additional inputs that Janan can give, I think it will be wonderful for the community, engineering community. Okay.
I will have all of the videos done by, have some vacation next week. I'll have all of the videos uploaded by next week.
Any further references also from Janan? It will be very, very useful to the community. Okay.
Please, I'll get all the what do you call, the presentation and the slides. I need some more help from people, because otherwise I'm ending up doing everything, so that I can put this presentation, not only the video, but also the actual slides in our webpage. That is going to take a little bit of time.
Please volunteer assistance. That will be great help. Thank you.
Thanks for making that. Any assistance, anybody who wants to join us in this endeavor of creating more lectures, and if you have suggestions of lectures, please do not hesitate. Send me an email, or my email is sub@cmu.edu. I can put it in the chat. If you send me the email, then I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, this CREI endeavor is a volunteer endeavor, and without your assistance and volunteer time, it would not. That's the only way it will work. And thank you for your offering your time and assistance.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining this and the future sessions. So thank you again, Janan, for sharing your perspective and experience in this domain. As usual, every time I also get to learn something new from the presentations. Some of the experiments that we have been doing in IIITTM are also influenced. Janan is also an associate adjunct faculty with us. And they've also tried to bring in more of this material engagement into the learning process in some of the courses, especially for the design courses that we do in the early stages for the first year, second year students. So thank you, Jinan, and thank you, sir, for